API, Mixtape Volume 3. Woo! Let's go.
So since I started README, one of the things I really cared the most about was what I said before, making sure that APIs aren't static, they're interactive. You don't like hit a wall and just have nowhere to go. Like there's debugging tools and stuff like that. So I'm gonna do a quick demo of something we're launching today called My Developers and Developer Dashboard. So I think everyone knows basically what a developer dashboard is. So we do documentation at README, of course. I don't have to explain what that is. Everyone kind of knows what documentation is. Developer dashboards, if you've ever used an API, you know what that is. A developer dashboard is where you get your API keys. You see API logs. If you run into a problem, you can go check. My belief is that if it's your first time on an API, you probably want to see a getting started guide. You want to know, okay, how do I get started with this? I want to get my API keys. I want a friendly, you did it message to say that it all worked. That being said, if it's your 100th time and your API is down in production, your boss is mad at you, you probably don't want that same Q getting started guide. You want a very different experience. So that's what we're trying to build with README. We want to make it so that everyone sees different things depending on what's going on with their API, things like that. So I'm going to kind of demo something we're launching called Developer Dashboard. All right, so the way this works is I'm going to get started by setting up two things. First, setting up the API keys and API logs. So API keys are done via webhook. When a user logs in and confirms their email, we'll send a signed request to your webhook, and you can return the information about the user that you want to. Their name, what plan they're on, and most importantly, their API keys. Don't worry too much. All our API keys are stored, they're hashed. We don't store them on our servers. They are stored in the user's browser, but on our servers, all we keep is a hash and the last 4 digits to identify it. I won't go through the full setup here. It's already set up, but it is pretty simple to get this started. It should take a developer about 5 minutes. Next up, I'm going to go over to API logs. This will send requests to README for each user. We use API keys to tie the users to the logs. Again, we don't store the full API key, just the hash. And we don't store all the data either. You can do an allow list, block list, just send what you're comfortable sending to us. Now, the setup isn't the exciting part. The exciting part is what happens next. So I'm going to have Gabe, who's over here on the stage with me, show us like to be a developer using the API that I just set up.
Thank you very much. So, I'm going to use this API for the first time. I'll start by going to the docs. That seems like the natural place. So I'm going to start out, and it's my first time using the API, so the first thing I need to do is log in. By default, there's a passwordless login, so I can confirm my email and log in with a single click. Pretty easy. Behind the scenes, my API keys were requested via the webhook that Greg just set up. Very cool. All right. If I click the link that I got, I'm taken to this Getting Started page. Looks like my API key is already filled in. How convenient. I can choose my preferred language and make a request right here in the docs. We've noticed that almost every site has an authentication page in their docs, but usually they tell you to go somewhere else, so it's not all-encompassing. We're big believers in showing rather than telling, so we've created basically an enhanced auth page where you can see all your API keys in a single place. So I can see all my API keys for the service, when they were last used, and more. This is what we're calling our developer dashboard. Lastly, we know that most people don't necessarily consume docs from start to finish. Most people have an idea of what they're looking to do and end up directly on an endpoint, either via searching in Docs, Google, or a direct link that someone sent them. We want every single endpoint page to include all the information a dev needs to make a successful call. Developers shouldn't have to hunt for information across various pages, go to different sites to get their keys, or figure out how to make an API call in their preferred language. You can see that there's a code snippet on every page. We've supported this for quite a while, but one of the coolest parts is that my key is right here in the code snippet. I can make some changes on the code to the right and have a copy and pastable code snippet ready to go. I can also run it inline, which I'm going to do now. This endpoint lets me change the lights behind me. Hopefully it works. I'm going to try to make them blue and hit
Live
try
demos.
it now.
Oh, we got two out of 3 are blue.
Well, there we go.
I'll take it.
I guess I made a successful call, somewhat, with pretty little work. I can even see my log right here in the docs. Now, let's see if I can change the theme to something else, colorful. I can copy this snippet in curl and open a terminal. Give me a sec to find it. There we go. And I'm going to try to run this via CLI. So let's execute this now. Looks like it worked.
Oh, it did work.
Very nice. Okay, that's great. Now I can tab back to the docs, refresh, and there's my log. That's great. But let's say I use a made-up color. CC mentioned something called blurple. Why don't we try that? If I go back to the CLI and edit my snippet. All right, I'm gonna run this.
Ooh, that did not work.
Looks like I got an error, but there's a link. If I click it, I can inspect what was sent from the server and what I got in return. This is super helpful when debugging prod. I may not always be able to tell what is being sent from the server and what the response is. So having it right here in the docs means I can debug fairly easily. I made these calls manually, but any requests made in production will also show up here. Now, I can obviously tell what I did wrong.
Wrong color.
Yeah. But what if I couldn't and needed some help from the API creator?
All right.
So I'm going to ask Greg for some help.
I can help out. Thank you, Gabe, so much for doing the demo of that part. Gabe is not just a spokesperson, he also led the team that built it. So awesome job so far, Gabe. Okay, so Gabe showed you the experience from the person who's using the API, someone who is trying to get started, hits a wall at this point, and Gabe's reaching out to me, the API creator, for some support. So now what I can do is I can go into my dashboard here, and I can search for his email address. I can search for gabriel@readme.io, and I can see him here. I can see his API keys. I can see everything. I can click into it, and I can see there it is, the 404, the same 404 you just had. So if I click into that, and if I scroll down a little bit, then I can see what the problem is, and I see that you used the color blurple, which is not a real color, even though we talked about it a few times already. So I can email back and say, okay, the problem was that you used a color that we don't support. Now, obviously, that's an easy one. You see all the headers, what's responded with, everything. So it's not just for more complex things. It lets your support team, PMs, anyone else really debug what's going on and figure it out. Now, I can do a lot more than just that. So I'm going to go back to the main page, and you can see all the developers, everyone using my API. I have 28 people using this API right now. I can filter down my endpoint status, so I can see a list of people who are using a certain endpoint or who use Node or Python or anything like that. And then I can see a sparkline. See on the right here, sparklines, I can see, so for example, Amy is not having a lot of issues here. Everyone else is doing good, so I can dig in to see what's going wrong and stuff like that. Because one of our beliefs that there's a lot of products out there that will do logs for APIs, and they're really great. But you'll see it and you look at it and be like, okay, there's a slight 1% uptick in errors, and you think, that's not that bad. It's not a horrible change. But that's someone real who's trying to do something real with your API that gets lost in this percentage. So what we really wanted to do is make sure that the main focus was the actual people using your API, and that's where we started. So now, let's say I want to deprecate a certain endpoint. What I can do is I'm going to do some filters here quickly, and I'm going to create a segment. And the segment's going to be issues with Owlfax, and I'll save it. And then I can check in a few months and see if the number's going down or up or anything like that. I can track different segments and see certain things that people are doing, if it's going well, things like that. So we have two main use cases for this. First is support, obviously. Someone writes in and has questions. You can look up who's using it and get them support, get them answers, stuff like that. Both on both sides. On our side as the API creator, and then on Gabe's side as the API user, he can debug himself as well. And second is for PMs or anything like that who's trying to understand who's using their API, how it's being used, and understanding changes, who it's going to affect. Like if you remove an endpoint, maybe it only affects 2 people, but if those 2 people are incredibly important, maybe you don't want to do it, things like that. So that is my developers and developer dashboard, which is, if you use README, it's live now. If you want to get help setting it up, we have a booth out front. Jeff and a bunch of other people will be there to help you get set up if you want to try it out. But that is it for that. All right, thank you so much, Gabe.
Thank you.
API, Mixtape Volume 3. Woo! Let's go.